So TVS has finally dropped its highly anticipated, homegrown adventure motorcycle, the RTX 300. Now, this bike is jumping into a really crowded and competitive field, but the buzz around it is just off the charts. So what's all the fuss about?
Well, that brings us to the big question, right? Is this bike the one that's going to completely redefine what we should all expect in this class? Let's dive in and find out.
But hang on. Before we get into all the nitty-gritty details, we have to make sure we're judging it fairly. And to do that with any new motorcycle, you've got to start from the right perspective.
And yeah, this quote just nails it, doesn't it? If you compare this bike to something completely out of its league, it's just not fair, and you're going to end up with all the wrong conclusions. So what is the right way to compare it?
Here we go, laid out nice and clear. Look, the RTX 300 is not a Himalayan 450 or a KTM 390 Adventure. It's a 300cc machine. It was built from the ground up to go head-to-head with bikes like the KTM 250 Adventure and the Suzuki V-Strom 250. That's the lens we need to be looking through.
Okay, so let's move on to that feeling you get in the showroom. You walk up to the bike for the very first time. What does it look like? How does it feel when you sit on it? This is where the story starts to get really interesting.
What's kind of fascinating is how different this bike looks in person versus in photos. Online, in pictures, it can look a little awkward maybe, a bit front-heavy. But when you see it in the flesh, it's a totally different story. The lines flow, it's really well proportioned, and the whole design just clicks.
This quote just sums it all up perfectly. If you get out a magnifying glass and really nitpick, are there some tiny imperfections in the finish? Sure, maybe. But when you remember what this bike costs, the overall look is just fantastic. It's all about that value proposition.
And the good news just keeps on coming when you hop on the bike. The ergonomics, or ergos, are totally spot on for touring. You've got this neutral, comfortable posture with just a slight relaxed lean forward. Everything, the levers, the switches, feels right where it should be. For an average height rider, it feels immediately natural, whether you're sitting down or standing up on the pegs.
All right, looks and feel are one thing, but the real question is, how does it actually ride? Let's get to the heart of it. The engine, the handling, and what it's really like out on the road.
So this engine, it definitely has its own personality. It's an over-square design, which is just a fancy way of saying it loves to be revved. To really get the best out of it, you got to keep those RPMs up. The sweet spot is between 5,000 and 8,000 RPM. That's where it really comes alive and just sings. Now you can ride it lazily, but you're not going to get that instant punch off the line. You've got to work the gearbox to unlock its fun side.
Okay, so during the first press rides, a bunch of journalists noticed this weird jerk from the engine. They thought it was a fuel cutoff or some kind of fueling issue, but the real culprit was something else entirely.
And here's the breakdown of what was actually going on. It wasn't a fueling problem at all. It was the bike's super sensitive quick shifter. Riders were just accidentally resting their boot on the gear lever, putting the slightest bit of pressure on it. That little touch was enough to activate the system, which cuts the ignition for a split second to prep for a shift. The solution? Just move your foot a little. Simple as that, problem solved.
Now let's talk about a massive highlight on this bike, the WP suspension. Man, it just hits that perfect sweet spot, kind of like the suspension on the Himalayan 450, which really set the benchmark. It's firm enough to feel planted and confident, but it's also comfortable enough to soak up rocks and ruts without ever feeling harsh. Honestly, for 98% of riders out there, it's perfectly tuned right out of the box.
So, you've got this great engine, amazing suspension, all these electronics, but out of all those fantastic features, what was the single best part of this motorcycle according to those who rode it first? The answer might actually surprise you.
Yep, the seat. I know, it doesn't sound very glamorous, but for a touring bike, a good seat is absolutely critical. And this one is fantastic. It's long, it's flat, and it has the perfect firmness, so it doesn't just collapse after an hour in the saddle. This means you can move around, shift your position, and stay comfortable for hours and hours. That's a huge, huge win.
Okay, so we've established the bike is really good on its own, but how does it actually stack up when you put it right next to its direct rivals? This is where we find out if it really is a new benchmark. I mean, just look at this table. It really tells the whole story. Against its main competition, the RTX 300 has a strong advantage in pretty much every single key area. The engine has more punch, the suspension is more capable and comfortable, the electronics package is just in a different league entirely, and like we just said, the comfort is best in class.
So here's the bottom line. When you judge it against its actual peers, the TVS RTX 300 isn't just another bike in the crowd. It's a leader. It has pretty much raised the bar for what you and I should expect at this price point.
So let's bring it all home. After all that, who is this motorcycle actually for? Who's the ideal rider for the TVS RTX 300?
This bike is perfect for the rider who wants it all, versatility and value. We're talking about someone who needs one single bike to do everything. Commute to work during the week, have a blast on the weekends, and then go on a proper long-distance tour. And you know what? It's an amazing option for someone who might be looking at a regular street bike but could stretch their budget just a little bit to get a machine that is way, way more capable.
Oh, and let's not forget the practical side of things. During testing in hilly, tough terrain, this bike returned 29 kilometers per liter. That's fantastic fuel economy, which makes those big adventures even more affordable and accessible.
When you get right down to it, this bike is the perfect gateway. It's approachable, it's capable, and it's packed with features. It's the kind of motorcycle that can take a rider from their daily commute into the incredible world of adventure touring, all without having to break the bank.
Which of course brings us right back to where we started. Based on the performance, the features, and especially that price, all the evidence seems to be pointing to a big resounding yes. TVS didn't just show up to the party, it feels like they may have just set a whole new standard.